friends, and welcome back to 100 Blocks in 2025. I don't even remember which block we're on at this point. I think we're somewhere near 45 or something like that. But we're going to do another fussy cut block today. But you don't have to do a fussy cut block, but I'm going to do it that way. So we're working out of the Farmer's Wife book. This is the block number 103. It's called the Whirlwind. So it's got some really fun spikes along the outside, but there we are. It's got our little square in the center, which gives us a great little spot to use a fussy cut piece of fabric. So I have this piece of fabric sample. Let's take a look at it. So here we go. I have this little fabric sample that has a bunch of gnomes on it. And again, I have my little squares here. So in our block, we're going to need our center square, which I'm calling 3.5 inches. Which means that everything around the outside has to finish at 1.5, so they're 2 inches. In order to finish this block, I have to have one 3.5-inch square in the center. Then I have to pick sort of two tones of fabric to make the design around the outside. In the dark tone, I'm gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4 2-inch squares. And then I'm gonna have in this little section right here, I'm gonna need a dark and a light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 half square triangles, which means I'm going to need 4 squares of light and 4 squares of dark, and we're going to cut those 2.5 inches. So that's the measurement of how we're going to do this block. And then moving along, so I'm going to cut this center out. I'm going to make a purple block today. I like having this multi-design because later on the gnomes might show up in a different color block, but today we're going to work on purple. So here I have my 3.5-inch little square, and let's start with the 3-inch square so you can see what our finished piece will be. And pretty much anywhere I come down in the row, I'm gonna get 3 little faces of gnomes, which I kind of like. And I like having one of the gnomes have a hat so you can distinctly see its hat. And so this is kind of about what I'm looking for my block. So I know I can finish the block like that. And because this is an all-over design, pretty much anywhere I go, I will have my 3.5 inches to cut my blocks. And because I can sort of go straight down the fabric like that and get what I'm looking for, I just went ahead and cut a 3.5-inch strip off of the side of this fabric. Now that's really exactly what I did in working on my little coffee girls up here. I cut 2 strips the right width, and then I was able to get where I needed. When I cut the cross sides of it, I was able to get what I needed in that little window, so I got what I wanted. But that's kind of how I did it. Once I figure out that I can get what I need out of a strip, I'll just go ahead and cut the strip. So now we have our strip of 3.5-inch fabric. I can set this one aside, and then we'll concentrate just on our strip. So now that we have a strip the width we need, if I just take my little 3.5-inch square here and I kind of decide where I want it to go, because this is finished. So I just want to make sure that I have enough of a square that I get 3 little gnome faces, okay? And one has a hat. And I want the hat to be purple because I'm going to turn this into a purple block. So that's about where I want to cut the bottom of the square in order to get it to work. So let's go back to our 3.5-inch square. So if I center my little purple guy in the middle, then I know I'll get what I want. So this is exactly 3.5 inches square. And I just want to make sure that I have about the same amount of space on both sides, because remember, I'm going to lose 1/2 inch, 1/4 of an inch on the bottom and the top when I go to sew this together. So I want to make sure I have that. And then once I do that, I can take my little chalk marker here and I can just make a line. So I want my block to be cut just like that. Okay, so now I have my little pink line on here, and I can turn it and I can cut that line with my ruler. So I've got my strip cut properly, so I know that edge is square. So I'm going to lay my ruler line down on here and make sure that the side of my ruler is on my pink line, and I can cut it right there. And then I'm going to turn it around and I'll make sure that I'm sizing straight to 3.5 inches. And there you go. Now my square is done and my little gnome is right in the center of it. And I'm ready to go ahead and build the rest of the block around him. And I definitely want a dark fabric and a light fabric. So the first thing that I pulled out of my stash was this guy right here, which is pretty close to the light color inside the purple hat. And then I thought, oh, I'll make this one go around the outside, and I liked that. But it kind of reads as a solid, but you're kind of seeing how I can do light and dark, and I can just kind of use my value with the scraps that I have around. And then I found another fabric here. So this one actually looks pretty good with it because it's a little more of a pinky purple, so I can surround the block in that. But I didn't have enough contrast on this one because I really want this to have that spinny. It is a whirlwind block, so I want it to have that windy, whirlwindy type thing. So I didn't care for that one as much. Same thing with this one. They're just too similar, and so I didn't really like that. And I definitely wanted to stay away from any type of pattern in my purple because, let's move these out of the way, I don't want it to compete. So while this has a lot of nice purples in it, it's just a lot of pattern. And I can save this for another day for something else. So what I wound up with, initially I set this fabric next to it and I'm like, you know what? I love that. That's a great purple. And I was looking for a shade of dark or a shade of light. And again, let's go back to what I had here. That's not too bad. Again, they're fairly close, but it's not too bad. I could get away with that. This one's even a little bit darker still. So if I wanted to, I could choose. And I'm really starting to see, do you see how the purple is really starting to pull out of that block? Even sort of the pinks over here are starting to read a little bit more purple because of the purples that I've put with it. And that's what I was going for right there. So what I ultimately decided was I love this one and I definitely wanted some contrast, but I didn't necessarily want it to read so solid. And I found this print, which is a deep, deep purple in the box. And it's got a little bit of a print to it, but it's also got a little bit of the red and a little bit of the blue and a little bit of the pink sort of reading out at it. And I kind of liked that a lot. So that's ultimately what I went with my high contrast light and dark. And I think that's going to create the contrast we need. So now that I have my definite dark, I know at some point about halfway through this block on this area, about this area, about this area, here are where my solid pieces are going to go, my little squares. And then the rest of that design is built with half square triangles. So I'm going to take my fabrics here. I have 4 of each of my squares, and I'm going to go ahead and make my half square triangles, and then I'm going to come back and show you what it looks like. All right, I'm done with my triangles. So now I'm just going to lay them out, and we're going to see how well we did with our whirligig pattern. So now we have our very distinct whirlwind pattern. So now all I have to do is sew. Again, I'll put the 2 units together and I'll just sew them in a line just like that so that I can finish my block. So what do you think? Now, why am I fussy cutting a lot of these centers? Well, I have a lot of little scraps. As you've seen, I have a lot of little salesman samples, and they're not enough fabric to really do a whole huge big thing with. I mean, I suppose if I made a bunch of little pouches or something like that with those little scraps of fabric, but they don't all go together. I can't put all of these novelty prints together in the same quilt and utilize the fabric the way we normally would. Or can I? Maybe I can put them all in the same quilt because I'm sticking them little bits by little bits into these little secret pockets inside the multicolored quilt that we're doing now. If you're truly utilizing your scraps, this is a way to just sort of stick a little bit in here and there. All right, gang, here is our whirlwind block, and this is our finished block. Look how cute. So I think we did a pretty good job of making the design stand out. And I really love the little gnomes in there. And I think it's pretty good. The purple hues are really coming out. So what do you guys think? Would you have used this in the center of your block? Did you? Would you have used the same purples? Would you have chosen this little printy fabric here to go around the outside? I'm curious. Hopefully you're making lots of blocks, and I'll catch you next time. Until then, catch me on the web at cabinquilters.com.